Hi there, this is Rory McCaw, and I'm going to take you on a guided tour of Windows Server 2003. In this exercise, 2-1, we're going to talk about using the Manager Server Wizard to install a DHCP server. Now, to do this, we simply have to click on Start, select Administrative Tools, and within Administrative Tools, you'll find the Manager Server Wizard. So if we launch that, that'll bring up the Manager Server dialog box or window, and you can see the name of the server that we're looking to manage, which is the local Windows Server 2003 computer, named WS03 Base 2. You'll find here the different roles that are configured on this server. In my case, I'm running this as an application server as well as a remote access VPN server. Now, the role that I want to add is the DHCP server. So I'm going to click on Add or Remove a Role. That'll bring me to the preliminary steps page where I can read through what those steps are, click on Next while it gathers some information, and then select from the list of server roles the DHCP server role. You'll notice in the right-hand column, the configured column, if there's a yes beside the different role, then it is configured for that. So we've seen on the previous page that it was this server was an application server as well as a remote access VPN server, and we can see that that's consistent with the information here on the server role page. Well, now to begin the configuration and install the DHCP server service, we'll click on Next and confirm in the summary dialog box exactly what's going to take place. So not only will the wizard install the DHCP server service, but it'll also, after DHCP server is installed, run the new scope wizard to configure a new DHCP scope. So to initiate this process, we'll click Next. Now, it's looking for the files required, and at this time you may or may not be prompted, depending on what it is you're installing and whether the files are stored locally or not, for the installation media. This is the recommended best practice approach to configuring your server. So Microsoft has come out and said we'd recommend that, as opposed to going into add remove programs and add remove Windows components and adding a network service like DHCP or Wins that way, or adding the server and enabling it to be, say, a VPN server through the routing and remote access snap-in, they recommend using this wizard, as this wizard will only enable the services required to support the server roles that you've selected. So now you can see that the DHCP server install has been completed and it's launched the new scope wizard. So we'll click Next, and we're asked for a name of the new scope. So I'm going to type in Toronto as the name of my local scope for the Toronto office. And then on the IP address range page, we're asked to define a range of IP addresses. So here we'll start with 192.168.1.200, and we'll put in an end IP address of 192.168.1.254. You'll see that at the bottom, based on the class of IP, in this case a Class C IP range was used, it defaults to 24 bits or a subnet of 255.255.255.0. We'll click Next, and we're asked to configure an exclusion range. Now, this is completely optional, as are most of the different settings within this wizard, but what the exclusion range provides you the ability to do is, if you want to set aside a certain block or different non-contiguous blocks of IP addresses to be assigned statically to, say, servers on that subnet, then you can exclude those from the available IPs to lease out by DHCP. Now, in this case, I could say I could exclude the 192.168.1.200 through to 192.168.1.205. Once we've added that information in, we just simply click Add, and if I wanted to add another non-contiguous exclusion range, I could easily enter that start and end IP address in and then click Add again. If I decided that as I was adding these in I made a mistake or I wanted to remove that, simply select the range that you've added and click the Remove button. To continue on, we'll click Next, and here we're able to determine and specify the lease duration. You can see that the lease duration on a Windows Server 2003 DHCP server defaults to 8 days, but that can easily be changed. I can change days to 0 and use the hours or minutes counters and add and make this a 1-hour lease time. Now, Normally, in organizations that have desktops as opposed to notebooks and mobile clients, you might actually look at increasing the lease duration as opposed to decreasing it so that there's less DHCP related traffic and the lease remains in effect for a longer period of time. The benefit of having a shorter lease duration is that if you do have mobile clients or you have employees or users that come and go from the office with a mobile device such as a notebook that obtains an IP address dynamically, after an hour that lease is expired and that makes it available for future clients or future users. So we'll set this to 1 hour. We'll click next, and then we're prompted as to whether we want to configure the default DHCP options, which include configuring a router or default gateway address, a DNS server address, or a Win server address. I'll leave the default of yes. We'll configure those options now selected and click next, and then enter the IP address 192.168.1.1 and click add. This allows me to enter one or multiple router or gateway addresses so that clients that obtain an IP address from the DHCP server are also provided with the address of a router on the local subnet. We'll click next, and then we're asked for the parent domain. So here I'm going to enter corp.macaw.ca. Feel free to check out the macaw.ca domain for interesting topics and information on both the services that myself and my colleagues provide, as well as up-to-date information on different Microsoft technologies. The server name for my DNS server is WS03DC. And if I click resolve, it automatically resolves that to the IP address 192.168.1.251, which is the IP that I've assigned to that DNS server. So I'll click add and then click next. I'm not working with a Win server on my local network, but if at your organization you do work with a Win server, again, you could enter the name of that server here and then the IP address here, click add, and you can list those and sort the order using the up or down buttons, much like you could on the DNS servers page. We'll click next, and then it asks us if we want to activate the scope now. Now, in my case, I may not be done fully configuring all of my different scope options because I wasn't presented with all of the options, only the defaults. So best practices again would suggest that I select no. I'll activate the scope later. The other thing that we don't want to forget to do is if we're working with DHCP and the server service is installed in Windows 2000 or Windows Server 2003 Active Directory, we'll also have to authorize the DHCP service. So I'll click next here and finish, and then finish on the wizard page. And what we'll see now back on the manager server page is as we scroll down, we'll find that the DHCP server role has now been added to this server. And we can easily click on the Manage this DHCP server link, which will open up the DHCP snap-in and allow us to go about managing and further configuring both our DHCP server and or one or more of the DHCP scopes that we want to create. The one has been created for us through the new Scope Wizard.